On the evening of May 9, 2001, more than 40,000 football supporters packed into Accra Sports Stadium in Ghana's capital city. They had come to watch one of African football's most heated rivalries. By the time the match ended, 126 people would be dead, making it the deadliest stadium disaster in African history and one of the worst crowd-related tragedies the world has ever seen. What began as a football match would end in catastrophe. And as with so many disasters, the warning signs had been there all along. To understand what happened that night, one must first understand what football means in Ghana. The sport is more than entertainment. It's a cultural force that unites and divides in equal measure. And no fixture carries more weight than the clash between Accra Hearts of Oak and Asante Kotoko, two clubs representing not just cities, but ethnic identities, regional pride, and decades of sporting rivalry. In May 2001, the stakes were particularly high. Hearts of Oak, the reigning champions, were facing Asante Kotoko in a crucial league match. Kotoko, based in the Ashanti city of Kumasi, needed a result to keep their title hopes alive. The atmosphere in the days leading up to the match was electric. The venue was Ohene John Stadium, more commonly known as Accra Sports Stadium. Built in 1960, it had a stated capacity of around 30,000 people, though crowd control at Ghanaian football matches had always been inconsistent. On match days, particularly for high-profile fixtures, that capacity was routinely exceeded. Security protocols existed on paper, but enforcement was often lax. Gates were poorly managed, emergency exits were inadequate, and the police, who were responsible for crowd safety, often relied on heavy-handed tactics rather than de-escalation. By the time kickoff approached on that Wednesday evening, the stadium was dangerously overcrowded. Some reports later suggested as many as 45,000 people were inside. The stands were packed, the aisles were full, and the exits, as would soon become tragically clear, were not designed to handle a rapid evacuation. The match was tense from the beginning. Kotoko took an early lead, and it seemed they will go back home with a slim victory. The crowd, a volatile mix of rival supporters, reacted to every moment with passion that occasionally tipped into hostility. For much of the match, the atmosphere was loud but manageable. Then, in the final minutes, Hearts of Oak scored twice in quick succession. With the home side now leading 2-1 and time running out, Kotoko's hopes of victory started slipping away. It was at this point that some Kotoko supporters began to express their frustration. First, there were chants. Then came thrown objects, plastic bottles, then stones, hurled toward the pitch and the Hearts supporters in nearby sections. Witnesses later described the situation as angry, but not yet out of control. Matches between these two teams often carried an edge. Violence was not unheard of, but what happened next would make matters far worse. Rather than attempt to calm the situation or isolate the troublemakers, police officers stationed around the pitch responded with tear gas. Multiple canisters were fired directly into the densely packed stands where Kotoko supporters sat. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. Tear gas, when deployed in an open space, causes intense discomfort, burning eyes, choking, and disorientation. In an enclosed, overcrowded stadium, it becomes something else entirely. Panic spread instantly. Thousands of people, desperate to escape the choking clouds, surged toward the exits. But the exits were locked. Reports vary on exactly why. Some gates had been chained shut to prevent fare dodgers from entering without tickets. Others were blocked by police officers attempting to contain the crowd. What is certain is that thousands of people, now in a state of terror, found themselves trapped. The physics of crowd crush are brutal and unforgiving. When a mass of people moves in the same direction, pressure builds. As those at the front are pushed by those behind, breathing becomes difficult. Ribs crack, bodies pile on top of one another. People die standing up, unable to fall, compressed by the weight of those around them. At Accra Sports Stadium, this played out in multiple locations simultaneously. At Gate 14 and Gate 15, hundreds of people collapsed against the locked barriers. Some were trampled, others suffocated. Witnesses described scenes of utter chaos, screaming, crushing weight, the desperate scramble to climb over walls or squeeze through narrow gaps. Children were among the first to fall. Emergency services were slow to respond. There was no coordinated evacuation plan, no medical teams positioned inside the stadium, no public address system to direct the panicking crowd. Police, many of whom had also been affected by the tear gas, struggled to unlock the gates in time. By the time the gates were finally opened, it was too late for many. In the immediate aftermath, the scale of the tragedy became clear. Bodies were laid out on the pitch. Injured survivors were rushed to Korlbu Teaching Hospital and other nearby facilities, many suffering from crush injuries, trampling wounds, and tear gas inhalation. The official death toll was confirmed at 126, though some reports suggested the true number may have been higher. Hundreds more were injured. Ghana, a nation that prided itself on its love of football, was in shock. President John Kufuor declared 3 days of national mourning. Flags flew at half-mast. The league was suspended indefinitely. Both Hearts of Oak and Asante Kotoko issued statements of condolence, though the rivalry would be forever stained by what had occurred. Public anger was swift and widespread. How could this have happened? Why were the gates locked? Why was tear gas used in a confined space? Why had the stadium been allowed to become so overcrowded in the first place? The government, under intense pressure, announced a formal inquiry. The investigation that followed revealed a cascade of failures at every level. First, overcrowding. The stadium had been filled far beyond its safe capacity, with no enforcement of ticketing limits. Second, inadequate infrastructure. Emergency exits were either locked, poorly marked, or insufficient in number. Third, the use of tear gas. Police commanders had made the decision to deploy chemical agents in a confined space, filled with tens of thousands of people. A catastrophic miscalculation. But responsibility extended further. The Ghana Football Association had failed to implement adequate safety measures. Local authorities had not enforced building codes or crowd management protocols. And there was a broader culture of complacency, a belief that nothing truly serious could happen at a football match. In the end, no one was ever convicted of criminal negligence. Some police officers were reprimanded. Some officials resigned. But the families of the victims received little in the way of justice. What did emerge, however slowly, were changes. New safety regulations were introduced for stadiums across Ghana. Crowd limits were more strictly enforced, at least in principle. The use of tear gas in confined public spaces was reviewed. Other African nations took note, implementing reforms of their own in an attempt to prevent similar tragedies. But the lessons had come at an unbearable cost. The Accra Sports Stadium disaster remains the deadliest crowd-related tragedy in African sporting history. It serves as a stark reminder that football, for all its joy and passion, can also be dangerous when safety is treated as an afterthought. Crowd disasters are rarely the result of a single mistake. They are the product of accumulated negligence. Locked doors, ignored capacity limits, inadequate training, and poor judgment in moments of crisis. In Accra, All of these factors converged in the worst possible way. 126 people went to a football match and never came home. Their families still carry that loss. And the stadium where it happened, though still in use today, will forever be marked by what occurred there on May 9, 2001. The tragedy could have been prevented. That is perhaps the most difficult truth to accept.